This is Stephen Wachowski, and this is Christian Music Network, and we're here with Steve Scott. So how are you doing?
Hi there. Thank you for having me, and it's great to be here, and I'm doing very well.
Good. So tell me about yourself.
I'll tell you briefly about myself. I'm
Okay.
British. I'm British. I was born in London. I went to art school in England. In fact, I started going to art school just around the same time as I came into Christian faith. So we're talking about the late 1960s. So I was at art school in London from the hippie era through the punk rock era. And I was a younger Christian during those tumultuous times. As I say, I went to art school, came to faith, was at an art school in South London. And while I was attending that art school, I went out one weekend to a nearby church that was having a music concert. And as a result of going to that concert, I went back for another concert. And the person playing at this concert was, and we're talking about the 1972 area, was a young musician from California named Randy Stonehill.
Awesome.
I was very impressed by Mr. Stonehill, and ended up being able to work it out whereby he could come back and play a concert at the church that I was attending for Sundays on a regular basis. And we got to be acquaintances and friends, and I got to play some of the music that I was writing. He got to play some of that music for a friend of his who was visiting at the time in England, South London area. And that guy's name was Larry Norman, and he was just beginning a record label called Solid Rock. And so the upshot is that when I completed art school in the mid 1970s, the idea of coming to California and making a record for Solid Rock was very much top of my list. We talked about it, thing to do. So dropped everything, packed everything up, and came on over to California, firstly to Southern California, where got in with the Larry Norman, the Randy Stonehill, Tom Howard, Mark Hurd, and a host of other, Alex McDougall, host of other dynamic, really good musicians that were believers and making music to help promote, proclaim the Christian message. Got involved with them, recorded a project for Norman. Due to circumstances beyond all our control, it never quite got finished and never quite came out. However, during my time down there, I'd gotten to travel a little bit with Randy, and we came up to Northern California, and where Randy was doing a concert at Warehouse Ministries in Sacramento. And I met the staff there. I met the senior pastor, Louis Neely, and his wife, Mary Neely. We got to talking. They were very interested in the use of the arts in the life of the church, as they had a number of artists going to the church. And they also recognized the place and the value of the arts in the life of the church. So as things began to unravel a little bit in Southern California, the idea of moving up to Northern California and becoming more involved with Warehouse Christian Ministries came up in conversation over and over again. And so I eventually moved up to Northern California, got involved with the church Warehouse Christian Ministries, got involved with them at the arts level, worked with them at a staff level. And when they began to they were using all different kinds of arts as part of the life of the church: poetry, theater, visual arts, music. And it was out of the music thing that firstly with a label called Songray Productions that eventually morphed into something called Exit Records. in terms of like a trajectory and a timeline. We began to make records there, and on that record label, of the musicians that were attracted to the church and got involved with that record label, bands like Vector, the 77s, Charlie Peacock, First Strike, Tom Goodlunas and Panacea. And I ended up getting to make a record for them as well, called Love in the Western World. So I had left England behind, left art school behind, retained an interest in the arts, bounced from one situation to another where the arts and faith and life of the church conversation was going on, and got to record for Exit Records, as well as continue to write songs and other things to do with, be involved in other ways with the arts from that point on.
Right. So it was kind of like a community thing.
Very much
Wow.
like a
Awesome.
very dynamic community of artists in the church. The church had a large body of students, alternative counterculture, and out of that came the artists, and the artists all we were there, 5 days a week, 6, 7 days a week, very much a community of like-minded believers and practitioners under the spiritual leadership of Lewis and Mary Neely.
Oh, great. So you also started Christian Arts Networking Association. Tell me about that.
Christian Artists Networking Association is the name I gave an organization originally called the Traditional Media Unit of the International Christian Media Commission. And basically, as a result of being at Warehouse Christian Ministries and being encouraged to explore connections between the arts and missions in other parts of the world, I ended up finding out about an arts conference on the island of Bali in the late 1980s. And I ended up getting to go. And I went to this conference in Bali, and I met the leadership there. And there were these artists from Africa, the Philippines, India, the Americas, England, and they were all sharing their work and reading papers and worshiping together and thinking and talking about the conversations around art and faith. Well, they did a conference in 1989 in Bali. They did another one in 1994 in Bali. And Bali is a really dynamic place. It's not only is the local culture saturated with art and spirituality, traditional spiritualities, but there are Christians. There's a dynamic church there that was looking for ways of modeling Christianity through local art forms. And we were invited to this conference to see that case study in work, at work, as well as listen to each other. Just go to the Protestant Church of Bali and see what it looks like, see it happening. So I got more and more involved with this organization. They did conferences in Bali. They did one in Croatia. They've done conferences in Bulgaria. And I got involved in the leadership infrastructure of this organization, and it ended up in the early 2000s being asked to take it over. And taking it over, and we did a conference in northern Thailand, then another one in Bali, and another one in Bulgaria. So Cana is basically a network. And of course, the concept of networking has changed a lot from the days when I would send out a newsletter to various places. Now we're all connected by email. And also there are plenty of other fine Christian arts organizations, both in what would be called the first world, and then also in the majority world or the emerging economies. As the conversation about faith and culture and the church goes, it has its European and its American component, but as it, in terms of just demographic and weight, that shifts to what people refer to as the Southern Hemisphere, there's much more of an international conversation facilitated by the communications technology about that conversation about the arts and culture and faith in a variety of contexts. And Cana is part of that conversation.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah. I mean, I started networking since like 1985, you know, and I don't know if you've gone on to our Facebook, you know, we have over 10,000 members now, but everything certainly has changed. Back then,
Yes.
yeah, back then I had to go to different concerts and talk to different churches and bands and all this stuff, and things are a lot different now, which is amazing.
Yes, they are. I would definitely say that they are, and I'm sure that brings up, well, as I say, with the change in the technology, the change in the communications technology, the change in the conversation among different groups of Christians about what we can do with the arts. More and more great books coming out from different authors like Mako Fujimura. John DeGruchy had a great book out on the arts about 20 years ago. Jeremy Begbie, and then the classics by Hans Ruckmarker, Calvin Sturvell, all those thinkers and practitioners who have sown into the soil of the Christian artist, as it were. And now it's all coming to fruition, but it's coming to fruition in a number of dynamic and surprising ways.
Certainly, yeah. That's just awesome, really awesome. So let's talk about your work. You have a poem that you record, Lilias. Tell me about that.
Well, Lilias, let's see if I can find that book. Lilias Trotter, excellent biography of Lilias Trotter, back in print. Buy it.
Awesome.
Find it. Author Miriam Huffman Rockness. I understand it's now just back in print. Go to your favorite online bookseller and order a copy. Lilias was a Victorian missionary. She started life, she's a well-to-do Victorian young lady, grew up in London, had a spiritual experience of her own at a Christian conference, and was very involved in two things. One is she was involved in ministry in London, dealing with streetwalkers, dealing with the Young Women's Christian Association, doing administrative work for D.L. Moody when he came over and did his evangelical campaigns in London. And but she was also an aspiring artist, a watercolorist and draftsperson. And apparently she has some considerable talent, because when the art critic John Ruskin saw some of her work, he formed friendship with her and very much was a mentor figure to her, and took her under his wing to instruct her in the arts. And she was making great progress in the arts, but also on her heart was ministry and increasingly mission. So that when she heard a speaker talking at a meeting that she and some friends had arranged about North Africa, she felt very, very much compelled that she was to go out there, as she did. And she stopped working on an art career and became a missionary to North Africa, to the Muslims in Algeria. And she worked out there tirelessly for her life, which is out there. You can read all about it in the biography. I don't want to give away Miriam's book while I'm talking. But the poem Lilias basically is a celebration of her life and her art and her increasing interest and concern with a particular branch of the Muslim community known as the Sufi. And so the poem itself draws upon Sufi poets in the first half. The poem Lilias, I take images and symbols from poets like Hafiz and Rumi, and I work them into my own poem. And then in the poem's second half, I take images, fragments, and writings out of Lilias's own books and prayer journals, letters, and diaries, and I work those into the second half of the poem. So the poem is a celebration of Lilias's ministry, her life, her ongoing artistry, and a life well lived, and also a celebration of her conversation with the Sufi tradition within Islam.
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. Wow. And
Get the biography of on Lilias. Look her up on Wikipedia.
okay.
All that stuff.
Awesome. Awesome. Sounds great. You have a song called "Love in the Western World." Tell me about that.
Well, I'll tell you about that song. I stole the title from a Swiss writer named Swiss, I think, Denis de Rougemont. And
Okay.
he wrote a book called Love in the Western World that was basically about the ideal of courtly love and romance and things like that, having a specific historical, social, and cultural origin. So I just took that language and stuck it in front of this song that's basically the story, if you like, of a young ne'er-do-well or someone who's coming apart at the seams, wishing he could make contact or connection, or he's looking for the right answers in all the wrong places. You know, he's looking for romantic love or just a quick one-night stand that will somehow scratch some kind of itch deep inside him, because he believes that he was made to be loved,
Mm-hmm.
and human. And he goes off desperately looking for validation and looking for a sense of his own humanity in all the wrong places, whether it be nightclubs, the disco scene, or whatever. That's basically what that song is about.
Okay, cool. You also have a song called "Emotional Tourist." Tell me about that.
Well, that in some ways that carries on, because there's the songs on the Love in the Western World project,
Right.
you know, dealt with one kind of alienation, one sense of internal displacement, where you try and answer that primal need to be drawn to God and forgiven by him and integrated into a relationship with him. You try everything but that. That was what Love in the Western World album was about. The Emotional Tourist is that someone, as it were, you know, again, looking for the right answers in all the wrong places. But here, he just travels everywhere, thinking he's going to find, as it were, home wherever he goes. And for me, one of the interesting things about Emotional Tourist is that it's an individual who, you know, skates across surfaces and never gets deep in the places he wants to find his home in. A lot of the imagery and the language I used for Emotional Tourist, or to inspire verses in Emotional Tourist, were taken directly out of my travel journals, whether it was being in Germany at one point, as I was, in Berlin, in a bar, watching people listen to Elvis Costello over a speaker system, or in a taxi cab in Connaught Circle in Delhi, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the morning. And as we come up to a traffic light, all the beggars, the children come out of who knows where, and they come up to your window So I was drawing specifically on things that I'd seen and heard to paint a picture of someone who had no sense of where they lived and was looking everywhere for that sense.
Neat. Awesome. Awesome. So, where can we get your music?
I want to believe, well, you should be able to, you could Google it. You
Yeah.
can find it. Stuff is a bit hard to find. You could contact, if you wrote to me, I mean, I've got a few copies left of some of the things, some of the albums that I've put out. If you write to me, and I can tell you what I have and what's realistic
Mm-hmm.
to let you have it for. I can guarantee that you will not be paying, if you pay me anything, you will not be paying the stupid prices I see some of the stuff going for through third parties
Sure.
or on eBay. I mean, I'm you know, I'm a bit more realistic and grounded than that, but I don't have much left. So if you want to get your hands on that stuff, drop me a line.
Okay. Okay. So, how can we contact you? How can we contact you?
What I suggest you do is if you go to, I have a whole site
Okay.
called Crying for a Vision, I think at wordpress.com.
Okay.
And that lists, there are various menus on that site, and that lists all the publications and all the albums and things like that. And if you message me through that site, did you say you were going to publish the link to that?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
You
Yes.
publish the link to that. If you reach me through that site, I can guide you as to how to get your hands on the Steve Scott product that you
Awesome.
want.
Awesome. 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 So, when you did concerts, what were they like?
When I first did concerts, well, they were incredible.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I thought they were brilliant.
Oh.
When I first did concerts, when I first started playing songs, I had long hair and a beard, and I was
Okay.
playing an acoustic guitar, and I was playing singer-songwriter type folky
Okay.
songs with occasional lapses into traditional country blues on another guitar with a bottleneck on my finger. When I began to work with a band, and more often than not, the 77s or some sort of hybrid 77s vector, and then eventually some musicians that I'd found, some other musicians came in, but the sort of the 77 slash vector slash assorted luminaries backing band and myself, it was electric, loud, and eventually we were working with a guy called George Holden in the Sacramento area, and he was doing a liquid light show for us. So we had the kinds of songs we've been talking about, the stellar musicians on stage that we've been talking about, and a backdrop of amoeba-like colors and shapes all over the place. So it was a pretty interesting multimedia kind of event. The one that I keep hearing about, and this did not involve liquid lights, unfortunately,
Okay.
was the Vector Charlie Peacock 77's Steve Scott melange that occurred, I think, around midnight at Cornerstone 90.
Oh yeah. Cool.
In a big hut somewhere. We all got on stage and we played. They were playing a bunch of stuff, and then I got up and did a couple. I did Not a Pretty Picture, and I read recently that there was a 25-minute version of Ghost Train.
Wow.
So with audience sing along. So it was is spectacular. I think it was spectacular. Other people remember it, probably with varying degrees of fondness.
Cool, 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 cool. So what's ahead for you? What's ahead for you? Are you doing any future project, or are
Future
you doing
projects?
projects now, or?
Well, yes. Where is it? I think one of the best books on Christian art. I mean, I mentioned a whole bunch of authors earlier.
Sure.
Or you can go look at the life and work of Lilias Trotter, who combined arts and missions. Read the biography of Lilias. I think the best book on Christian art is the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John is a case study in how to dynamically engage the culture that God has placed you in. For the author of the Gospel of John, he had one foot in shared with his audience Jewish culture, Israeli culture. So the Gospel of John has lots of Old Testament echoes just under the surface. John had another foot in the surrounding culture, which was Greco-Roman. So some other scholars, so while there's one body of scholars that emphasize John's relationship to the Old Testament and where he drew from for the imagery and the language in describing the life of Jesus, others have pointed out that Roman public speaking, Greek drama, these things had an impact in how John wrote what he wrote. And if we have at the end of the Gospel of John, where the ascended Christ is in the room and he says, "As the Father sent me, so send I you." If John believes that what he was doing in making it relevant to his Jewish sisters and brothers and making it relevant to the Greco-Roman environment he was in, if that was a faithful acting out of that commission, then I think, why not us also? We have the same Holy Spirit.
Exactly.
So I look at John not just for theological ideas about Jesus, but also I drill down into the stories and I say, what can these stories tell me about how John engaged the culture of his time? And what lessons can I learn and apply in my time? So my work at this point is attracting more people to the Gospel of John as a working, actionable case study in creativity and cultural engagement.
Cool.
So I've given lectures, talks, and I'm blogged about it, and I'm writing more stuff about it. So that's my main gig at this point, writing more songs, trying to organize the songs that we talked about, along with other songs, into something that tells a clear story of someone losing their mind, as it were, and then coming to faith, coming home. I want to arrange all my songs in a narrative arc so they do that. And then also completing a sequence of poems based on Lilias Trotter's work with a Sufi Muslim. She wrote a book called The Way of the Sevenfold Secret, which explored and examined all the I am sayings recorded in the Gospel of John. I am the good shepherd, I am the true vine. Lilias wrote about all those I ams in a way that could be listened to from the heart by her Sufi friends back in the whenever she wrote the 1920s or whatever. One of my goals is to complete a series of poems that build off Lilias's example and brings it into the present day. It takes all her language and the I ams and the imagery from her work, some of my imagery, and go back to the John references and brings it forward into the 21st century. So reorganizing my songs to tell the salvation message, telling everyone Gospel of John is your book, and working on The Way of the Sevenfold Secret myself, poetry and musical backgrounds, sound loops.
Awesome, awesome. So do you have any advice for other musicians?
Persist, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, it's unfortunately it's all too easy, and because I made a note to myself, it's all too easy to criticize other people. I know it's all too easy because I've done it countless times myself. So rather than that, I just want to become a better lyricist. I want to become a more inventive inventor of melody and tunes and sound, and I want to become a more dynamic arranger. And I want these things for myself, and I want to believe that other people want that for themselves as well. Fundamentally, I mean, that's it. Whether they're famous or they're obscure, I believe our goal is to get better at what we do. That's what I want for myself, and that my hope and prayer is that's what they want as well. So persist. Look for ways of taking advantage of the current media landscape to promote what you do, but persist in what you do, get better at it, and look for some of the most amazing people I see have a YouTube channel and a Bandcamp page. You know, they're not out there touring all over the place. They're appearing, they pop up here and there. I mean, I followed one artist, Heather Hammers, the last 5, 6, 7 years. YouTube videos. She covers other people's songs. She puts on she like original stuff she puts up. And she now has a Bandcamp page and an EP of material. But I've always been impressed by what she's done, both in covers and original songs. And she is a fine role model in terms of just seeing what the media has to offer in terms of distribution options and just going for it rather than waiting for the big break to happen, which may never happen. Simply look at the landscape and figure out what your path is through it and walk that path. Persist, get better at what you do, and keep an ear to the ground for the way the dynamic opportunities are coming up for sharing and distributing your work.
Great. Thank you, Steve. That's really good advice. So, yeah, so I would like to thank you for coming on. With my pleasure having you.
Thank you. It's been great being here and great getting a chance to talk.
Certainly. Any last words?
Lilias Trotter, Gospel of John.
Okay, awesome.
And Mako Fujimura.
Yeah. All right. Well, God bless you and all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work in getting people to talk and getting this stuff out there. Thank you very much.
Yep. And good night.
Good night to you too. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye for now.